Hey everyone, Jason from Iron Fence Shop with a quick answer to a common question we get all the time. Today's question is, what are the pros and cons of using an aluminum fence or driveway gate? Now before we jump into the pros and cons, one thing I want to emphasize is that iron and aluminum fence and gates are as different as apples and oranges. So what we discuss in this video will not apply to anything iron, steel, or fence and gate related. This is all just about the aluminum. Let's go ahead and start with the pros of using an aluminum fence and gate. The first and foremost is, it typically costs a fair amount less than iron. These prices can be dramatically less. Now, does that mean that it's a lot better fence for being less? Not necessarily, and we'll get into that in the cons. But if you're looking at it from a pure price perspective, aluminum will always typically be less expensive than iron, with the exception of some driveway gates where the aluminum gates might be actually slightly more. But for the most part, aluminum costs less than iron. Pro number 2 is the one that people always think about when it comes to aluminum fence, and that's that it doesn't rust like iron and steel fence. Now, just because aluminum doesn't rust doesn't mean that it's as maintenance-free as the entire industry acts like. Everything does require a little bit of maintenance. So if I take a screwdriver and take a chunk out of this aluminum fence, it's not gonna rust, it's not gonna turn orange, it's not gonna get a hole eaten in it. But what will happen is you're gonna get what's called pitting and oxidizing. And in that process, you're gonna see kind of a lumpy, gray, fuzzy finish on the bare metal. And what'll happen is over time, that's gonna keep expanding that damaged spot as that gray, fuzzy material keeps pushing the finish off in little pieces. So even though it's not gonna rust, you do still wanna do some upkeep and maintenance on your aluminum fence, but it doesn't rust and degrade the same way that steel and iron does. The third pro of using an aluminum fence and gate is that it's lightweight and easier to move around. To give you an idea, a 6x8 commercial iron panel weighs about 120 pounds. That 6x6 commercial aluminum panel weighs maybe 12 to 15 pounds. Now that could be a pro or a con, but at the end of the day, when you gotta lug this stuff around taking your delivery off the truck or installing it in your yard, the aluminum's gonna be a lot lighter and a lot easier to move around. That also goes double if you're installing a big aluminum driveway gate. That leak could be literally half the weight of its iron counterpart. Now, let's hop over to the cons of using an aluminum fence and gate. By far, the biggest trade-off or con of using an aluminum fence and gate is strength. The strength of an aluminum piece is just nowhere near that of an iron piece. The given natures of aluminum is it's a much lighter duty material. That also means it's an easier material to bend. Couple that with the fact that an aluminum fence is screwed together versus welded together on an iron one, and you get a piece that flexes and moves and is very light duty. If you've got active young kids and dogs, I will typically tell you to go towards iron. So strength's a big concern, whether it be security, small kids, active dogs. You may want to consider iron just to avoid that whole situation. Saving money on an aluminum fence only to have the kids and dogs destroy it 6 months in is not really a cost savings. Con number 2 is that installation can be a little bit more daunting for a first-time installer due to the nature of how aluminum gets installed. With an iron fence, you concrete your posts in, you go back and hang your panels when they're dry. So as long as your measurements are fine, it's pretty straightforward. With an aluminum fence, you have these little punches in the posts. And what that means is that when you're putting your post down in the wet concrete, you're putting your fence into it at the same time. So when you're putting your aluminum fence in, you have to basically kind of race the concrete drying. You're assembling that whole fence line as the concrete's wet in the hole. So not only do you have to be careful as you set this one, but 5 panels down here, you can't be shoving into the fence line and putting every post out of whack as you're installing it. So that can sometimes put people off, and it's a key thing I like to bring up when it comes to the installation of aluminum fencing. Our third con is you will see less style and custom build options with aluminum. Steel and iron have been around and in use longer than aluminum, so there are more castings and styles of parts available. Aluminum also tends to be more of a keep it cheap fence, so you're not going to see it used for more elaborate styles and decorative elements like you will on iron fence and gates. The fourth con of using aluminum fences and gates is that build quality varies immensely. Unlike those of us in the iron and steel game, there's maybe 3 to 4 of us left, but when it comes to aluminum fence and gates, I wouldn't be shocked if there's 100+ different companies out there doing it. Now you must be thinking, well yeah, I guess it's the better material, that's why there's so many more out there. It's because aluminum fence is cheap and easy to build. Whereas you need skilled welders, machines, jigs to weld together iron and steel fencing, all you really need is a DeWalt power tool, an extruder, and some cheap labor, and you're an aluminum fence company. The problem with that is that means pricing and quality is all over the place. So if you see a panel that's way less over here versus ours or somebody else's, I would question that as more suspect than great. Now it could be they're just a great deal, but 9 times out of 10, there's a reason behind it and it's cheaper, lower quality. A lot of aluminum fence builders are kind of doing the race to the bottom thing, where if I can build it for 50 cents cheaper than the next guy, I'll cut corners on construction, finish, appearance, just to get that job. So when you're buying an aluminum fence, a con to me is you really got to deep dive and make sure what you're getting is a quality unit and going to fulfill the needs you want. So there we are. Use those pros and cons to determine if an aluminum fence or driveway gate is best for you. Now, if you still aren't sure if aluminum is right for your project, give us a call at 800-261-2729 or shoot us an email at sales@ironfenceshop.com. We look forward to helping you with your project.